Here we are, my 8th video. However, it's extra special because, like I've been saying in my other reviews, I can finally go back to the beginning now, and this is the first book that I read and reviewed in this journey to 1,000 books. And the best thing about this for me is that I technically already have a review typed out. My first 4 reviews that I had done, I'd actually just physically typed them out and just posted them on my private social media. And so, with just a little bit of tweaking, it's in a pretty good spot now, where all I had to do was transcribe it, and now I can just read it to you. Just one little note: because this is nonfiction, there's not going to be like a spoiler-free portion, because it's literally just history. So this is one of the greatest books that I've ever read, period. Eugene Sledge outlines his time with the United States Marine Corps during the Second World War in the Pacific Theater. Sledge does not hold back at all when it comes to the gory and graphic details of that war and the things that he had seen. He does not shy away from things that other war memoirs do tend to shy away from writing, just for the sake of being appropriate, I guess. His descriptions of rotting corpses in the sunlight and the low buzz of millions of blowflies lifting from the corpses of his friends and his enemies to just harass the Marines during the day is just, it's shocking to read some of these descriptions of the things that these men experienced. The casualty figures are also equally striking. Learning how few men actually survived the campaigns at Peleliu and Okinawa is so shocking that the numbers almost feel like they're made up. These are the numbers. K-35 landed at full strength of 235 officers and men on the 1st of April, 1945. The company joined 250 replacements during that campaign, for a total of 485 serving. Of the 50 men left at the end of the campaign, only 26 had made the landing. To put that into perspective, that means that out of every man who stormed the beach at Peleliu, only 1 in 10 made it to the end of that campaign. That land battle only lasted 2 months and 3 weeks, which comes out to an average of about 5 casualties a day. This is obviously just an average. Anyone who has been to war before knows that there's a lot of time when you're just kind of spent sitting around and not a whole lot happens, and then there's just these bursts of just insanity, incomprehensible insanity. And Sledge does talk about that. He says that, some days absolutely nothing happened, and then the next day they would have 30 casualties in just a few hours, just in his company alone. Other than the violence and graphic descriptions in this story, there's another thing that sets it apart from other war memoirs, and that's who is writing it. Most popular memoirs are written by, officers, high-ranking people, other just important people within the military itself. Navy SEALs, for example, love to tell their stories, no matter what they did or didn't do. There's been a lot of questions about the validity of some of these things these Navy SEALs have said they've done in their war memoirs. But with the old breed is told by a grunt, an infantryman, the lowest level soldier, or I should say the lowest level Marine in the entire Marine Corps. He was out there on the front lines in the worst theater of the worst war that humans have ever waged. Anyone who has seen combat will recognize the feelings that Sledge talks about here, the camaraderie, the conversations uh, that he has with his friends. It's very familiar even to those who have barely even experienced anything. It's quite strange uh, how close the worst things you can experience in war, and even the minor things that you can experience and still say that you've been to war, how closely some of those emotions are. When reading this book, I can't help but be reminded of another man who attempted to depict this same war in all of its graphic truth. Tom Lee, an El Paso native, who painted these two images: The Price and the 2,000-Yard Stare. These paintings were met with scrutiny by many Americans at the time, who thought that Tom was being dramatic in his depictions, uh, making these battles look far worse than what they actually were just for shock factor. However, he always upheld that he only ever painted the things that he had actually seen. Americans did not like seeing the war as it truly was. And throughout history, many cultures have believed that war is a beautiful thing, an honorable thing. Violent, yes, but necessary and even romantic. Hollywood has far disproportionately depicted the European theater of World War II. I mean, there's just something about watching Nazis get their butt kicks that just feels good. Uh, However, if your understanding of the Pacific theater of the war is simply, Pearl Harbor, Iwo Jima, and nuclear bombs, if that's the extent of your knowledge in the Pacific War, then I highly recommend you read this memoir or listen to Dan Carlin's hardcore history collection, Supernova in the East. It's outstanding. I've listened to it completely through multiple times now, and I'm going to listen to it multiple more times because it's just so good. It covers the events of the war in great detail. It's not full of just battle plans and numbers, and that's not the way Dan Carlin likes to do things. Uh, it tells firsthand accounts of atrocities and the horrors of battle. It focuses on the human side of the deadliest war in human history. Eugene Sledge, a man who was nicknamed Sledgehammer, uh, he spent massive amounts of time killing and sleeping amongst rotting corpses, the rotting corpses of both his friends and his enemies alike. Uh, this is a guy who spent his chow time plucking blowflies out of his soup cans, blowflies that were so fat with the flesh of his dead buddies that they could no longer fly. This is a man who experienced countless horrors, war in its truest form, in its deadliest and most haunting form. This guy would later go on to give up his hobby of hunting because he could no longer stand the idea of killing. Eugene Sledge, literally against all odds, survived the war and went on to become a professor of biology, eventually passing away on March the 3rd, 2001. If you are interested in reading this story but don't necessarily have the time to read, then I highly recommend you watch The Pacific on HBO. It's kind of like Band of Brothers, but set in the Eastern Theater. It's not nearly as brutal as the things that actually happened, but it covers the basics and it does a decent job of keeping the emotions. Um, it covers Eugene Sledge's story. It covers the memoir. I think it was Pillow for Helmet for My Pillow. Helmet for My Pillow, which is probably the second most popular war memoir to come out of this theater of the war, and it also covers I forget his name, but he was a Medal of Honor recipient, and he was very famous. He was a guy who won the Medal of Honor. He left, became a trainer, and then said, "You know what? I want to go back to war," and he went back to war. Um, Basilone, yep, Basilone was his name, Sergeant Basilone, great guy, Gunny Sergeant Basilone, legend. But he unfortunately ended up dying at the Battle of Iwo Jima. Anyways, I highly recommend this book, even if you don't enjoy reading nonfiction. If you don't normally read nonfiction, it's definitely worth it. Yeah, that's all I got. Adios.